Parshat Shemot is the second book of the 5 books of Moses. It is a very different kind of story than the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis is called Sefer Yeshurun, the book of straightness. It's the book of families, the book of individuals, the book of unique people who stood up against a world that was so different than the world that they came from. They stood against the philosophies of the world, the ancient world that they came from. And now they've created a family. It's called the Children of Israel. And there were 70 souls that came down to Egypt. And the parasha ended with Yosef being reunited. Last week, the Sefer Bereshit ended with Yosef being reunited with his brothers and meeting with his father. His father telling him, you know what, I don't want to be buried here, a call to remind him that, you know what, we are not going to remain in Egypt, but rather we have to go back to the land that we came from, the land of our forefathers, back to the land of Canaan, to Canaan land. And he makes him promise that he's going to bury him in the land of his forefathers. And he does so. We know at the end of the parasha also that Yosef makes the brothers make a promise to bury him also in the land of Canaan. He doesn't want to remain there. Parsha begins with Ve'ele Shemot Bnei Yisrael Habayim Mitzrayma. These are the names of the children of Israel that are coming from Egypt. We have Yaakov, Ishu Beito, him and his family, his home. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. It goes to the names of all the tribes again. Yisachar, Zvulun, Binyamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher. Now, my question is like this: why go through all the names? You know, you made it very clear. These are the children. These are Ve'ele Shemot Bnei Yisrael Habayim Mitzrayma. Okay, then just stop there, right? We don't go through all the names, but these are just some of the names. We tell the names of these particular individuals, but the pasuk then tells me that what? That in total there were 70 people. V'hi kol nefesh yotzei yerach Yaakov. These are the souls that come from the loins of Yaakov. Shivim nefesh. There are 70 souls. But Yosef hayab in Mitzrayim. Yosef was in Mitzrayim. Well, we know that he's in Mitzrayim. Why do you got to tell me that he's in Mitzrayim? Why do you got to tell me the names of these people? You could either just say that Ve'ele Bnei Yisrael Habayim Mitzrayim at Yaakov. Why do you got to tell me El Shemot Bnei Yisrael? Why do you got to tell me the names again? That's question number one. Question number two is, why tell me that Yosef's in Mitzrayim? Obviously, he was in Mitzrayim. By Yosef hayab in Mitzrayim. I don't need to know that. It's clear that he's there already. The pasuk continues and tells us like follows: V'yamot Yosef v'kol echav v'kol hador hahu. Yosef dies, and the whole entire generation dies with him. Why do I need to know this? Okay, why is it important? We knew that he died already in the previous parasha. Why do we have to mention it again over here? But the Jewish people, they procreated and they had a massive population growth. And the land of Egypt was filled with these people. And again, the question is, why do I need to know this? Pasuk continues. This is just the first 8 psukim. V'yakol melech hadash al Mitzrayim, and a new king arose in Egypt. Asher lo yada et Yosef, who did not know Yosef. Why is that important? Why do I need to know that there was a new king that did not know Joseph? Okay, let's keep going over here because there's a deep pattern here. Vayomer el amo, and Paro tells his people, Hine am bnei Yisrael ravad sumimenu. We see the Jewish people; they're larger and greater than us. Let's outsmart them. Pen yirbe, unless they become bigger. If there's a war, that he will join, the Jewish people will join our enemies and overthrow us and take over our land of Egypt. What's going on, Nate? Sending you lots of love back. Why do we need to know about the expansion of the Jewish people and this new king? Okay. And then we go into the difficult work, and that kind of launches the story of Moshe and him becoming the savior of the Jewish people. So let's go back for a second. What's the function of the names? Where's the first time someone gave something names in the Torah? Vilna Gaon teaches us that if you want to understand the nature of something, see how it's being used at its inception. The first time we see the first time we see someone calling names was Adam. right? That's very good. You guessed it. Adam was in the Garden of Eden, and God says to him, lo tov li adam levado. It's not good for man to be left alone. Aselo ezer kenegdo. We're going to make him a helpmate. And then right after that, God tells Adam, excuse me, I apologize for not covering my mouth, but no one's here right now. And then I'll make sure to fumigate the room when I leave so that no one's infected with anything that may be coming out of me. Okay. Here it says like this. It says, and God had formed all the things all the living creatures that are on the earth, the kol off and all the birds. He brings them lirot ma yikra, to see what he will call them. Right? The kol asher yikra lo ha'adam nefesh chaya hu shemo. And whatever Adam called those things, that was their name. V'yikra Adam Shemot l'kol ha'behema. He gave names. This is the first time you see the word Shemot. Shemot. He gave names to all of the behemot and all the birds. The kol said all the creatures of the field. Adam lo matzah ezer kenegdo, and he realized that he was alone. Okay, he could not find a helpmate. So what does God do? He puts him to sleep, and he takes a rib from him, and he creates a woman. What does he call her? Nothing. That's not true. What does he call her? He calls her Isha. This is the bone of my bone, basar me basari, the flesh of my flesh. Zot yikra, and therefore will I call her Isha. I'll call her Isha, a woman. Ki, why? This is very telling, ladies. Most of the people here are women, I think. Everyone here is a lady. Okay, so this is very telling. Okay. He says here, ki what? Ki isha. Yikra isha ki mi ish lukha zot. She's called a woman. Why? Because she was taken from a man. Now, what does that sound like? Ki mi isha lukha, because she was taken from a man. How is Adam relating to his wife? He's relating to her, my friends, as an object. She was taken from me, and I'm calling her woman because she's my woman, right? And that's the way Adam relates to her. Now, interestingly, he changes her name. Remember when? He changes her name after the chet, after they both sin. He calls her Chaya. He calls her Chava because she is the mother of all living things. And this was a transition in Adam's understanding of Chava and his relationship with her from the object to a subject. Okay? The purpose of a name is to give us an understanding of what things are. You name your children with the hopes and aspiration that they live out their namesake. We go ahead and we name items around us so we could talk about them in a meaningful kind of way, right? The names of the Shvatim are 12, and the 12 names represent 12 different spiritual paths of potential that the Jewish people can draw into the world. Okay, names are not accidental. Names are not just arbitrary. Names are specific combination of letters that allows us to draw down the spiritual forces to help us understand the world and perfect it. And it's not an accident that that's what's happening here. Where are the Jewish people? In Mitzrayim, in Egypt. What's happening down there? A mass assimilation is happening down there. How do they maintain their identity? By keeping their names, by keeping true to who they are, their identity, their core. Okay, and that's why the Pasukim is telling us about all these people. This is who we are. We are Bnei Yisrael, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun. These are the names of the children of Israel, and the names are their names is what allows them to maintain their deep connection to this concept called Yisrael, the Sar Els, the princes of God. Okay, why is Yosef found in Mitzrayim? Because Yosef maintained his identity in Mitzrayim. Pasuk's reminding us. Yosef had Ephraim and Menashe. and Yifrayim, Menashe, Reuven, and Shimon. He's able to maintain his Jewish identity in Egypt. And as these Jews are living in Egypt and they're growing in numbers and numbers and numbers and numbers, what's happening? They are not assimilating. Now, what would happen in a country where you have a subgroup that moves in and chooses to maintain their unique identity and not take on the identity of the local population? They will feel threatened. Okay, and that's what the Pasuk is pointing out to us. There's a massive population growth with the Jewish people. They are having lots of kids. Midrash says that every time a woman gave birth, she popped out 6 kids. Okay, I hope she had an easy time doing that, but she was giving birth to six kids at a time. And the Egyptians were frightened by the sheer numbers of the Jews. So Pasuk tells us, "Vayikol melech hadash al Mitzrayim." Okay, what's the lesson over here? Why does it need to tell me that a new king arose in Egypt? Asher lo yada et Yosef. Obviously, if it's a new king, he didn't know Joseph. Why do you got to tell me that he does not know Joseph? So now it's interesting. The name of this king is Paro. Paro comes from the 2 words pe ra, a bad mouth, right? He is someone who uses his speech in a very powerfully negative kind of way. When Moses says to him that I am representing the God of Israel, what does Paro say? Lo yada et Elokim, I don't know your God. So listen to what Rav Nachman of Breslov says. Rav Nachman of Breslov says something powerful over here. He says like this. He says, Vayoko melech hadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yada Yosef. What a chutzpah. The Pasuk is telling us that Paro was someone who lacked appreciation. He was the most ungrateful person in the world, right? How can I say that? It's very simple. You see, Yosef was the person who saves Egypt. He's the guy that, finds the process and storing the food and gathering the food and selling the food and giving Egypt everything they need to survive. How can you have a king who ignores all that which Yosef did for the people? Well, it's very easy. You see, Paro, he was an ungrateful person. And the Pasuk is telling us, Rabbi Nachman says that someone who is ungrateful to humanity, right, is someone who is ungrateful to God, right? I don't know your God. I don't know, who he is, because I'm not the kind of person that builds relationships in that way. It's all about my own narcissistic wants and needs. That's all that I am interested in, nothing else. I live in my own reality, my own world, and that determines my my desires, my wants, nothing else. I live in a selfish plane where all I think about is my own needs, my own desires, and so on and so forth. Pasuk is teaching us that if you're around people that are ungrateful, know that those people don't have a relationship with God. And on some level, people that don't have a relationship with God find it more difficult to show gratitude to people. It goes both ways. I'm not saying it's universal, but there's something there. Okay, someone who's super grateful generally is someone humble enough to recognize that there is a Borei Olam, there is a God in heaven. Okay, Pasuk continues, right? And Paro becomes he's this selfish person, ignores everything that Yosef does. He is, again, interested in building his own, he wants to show that he's in control. He wants to show that he's the man, he's the Chachma. He has a whole entire organized plan of building out Egypt and building out the country. So he's going to outsmart God. What is he going to do? He's going to trick the people into creating a system where they're going to work for the government. Okay, they're going to force them onto a government plan. Okay, there's a wartime happening. We got to prepare for war. We have information that some other country is going to attack us. We need you help, you loyal Jews. Show us how loyal you are. Get to work. They start working, and slowly they take away their freedoms legally, and eventually they become the slaves that we know them to be. The Jewish people, they work really hard in Egypt. This is why we maror, right? They embittered their lives by with hard, difficult work, by building bricks, all the different kinds of work in the field. They did this tremendous, very intensive labor. Now, what does Paro say? He sees that this is not slowing down the birth rates. he says to these two women, these two women who are the doulas of the Jewish people. He tells them to go ahead and kill every single boy that is born. Let the women survive. And now the question is why? What was he trying to do here? Population control? This is not population control. If it was population control, he should have killed the men and the women. But he wasn't interested in losing the women. And the reason why he wasn't interested in losing the women is because he wanted to make sure that he had the women around because he related to them as the objects that he could use for himself. So this is how it works. You create a shidduch crisis by getting rid of all the guys. No good guys out there, right? A lot more girls than there are guys. And now the girls are walking around saying, do I really need to marry a Jewish guy? Maybe I'll find a nice Egyptian boy. This is exactly what Paro wants. This is how you destroy a people. You destroy a people by creating a situation where they're not getting married and they're forced to look outside of their culture, their heritage. And that ends up, kind of eating away at their ability to maintain their unique identities. So what happens? Paro has this whole thing figured out. Okay, he is in a place where he thinks he's in control, where he thinks that he's going to, outsmart the world. And what happens? The exact opposite happens. It's true that Amram, Moshe's father, Yocheved, his mother, get divorced. That's what Midrash says. They separate. Why? Because Amram says, listen, we're losing this battle. We've been enslaved for so long. I don't want to just give birth to children that we're going to have to kill. It's too difficult. If God wants to save us, he'll save us. I am no longer maintaining a healthy relationship. We're getting divorced. And as a result of his divorce, what happens? Everyone gets divorced. All the men in Egypt divorce their wives. What does Miriam do? She comes and says, Dad, what are you doing? Your decree is way more harsh than Paro. So he says, why? Because your decree also makes sure that no girls are born. And we know it's through the merit, the schut nashim tzedkaniot, and the merit of the righteous women that the Jewish people are always being saved. So what happens is that God says, so Amram says, you're right, he gets married. Who's born that night? He gives birth, him and Yocheved give birth to Moshe. Now listen to the irony. This is the book of irony. Paro believes that he's in control. So what does he do? He says, take every single baby and throw them into the river. Take every single child that is a male child and get rid of them, okay? I'll figure out how to take over this people and have them be my subjects forever. But he was wrong, right? And I think this is the lesson of the book of Shemot. The book of Shemot is all about reminding ourselves that sometimes in life we need to let go, that we're not in control. That when we think that we have plans that are going to go one way, be prepared because God has a whole different kind of plan set aside for you. So, for example, it's a story of a Frenchman who walks into a restaurant, and he walks into this French restaurant, and he's sitting in this restaurant. He sees a Jew across the room sitting by himself at a table. So what does he do? He doesn't like Jews, so he sends this waiter, calls the waiter, says, buy everyone in the restaurant a side dish, but make sure the Jew doesn't get one, right? And waiter brings out, and he's like, oh, this is from that guy, this is from that guy, and he ignores his table. And he sees the Jew smiling. He's getting annoyed. He says, you know what? Bring out dessert for every table and not for him. Brings out dessert for all the tables, and this guy's still smiling. He's getting even more annoyed. He's like, bring everyone a bottle of wine. Still smiling. So he goes over to the Jew. He's like, I don't understand. He's like, what's your problem? He's like, I went out of my way to exclude you, right? And here you are, you're still smiling. He's like, yeah, I'm still smiling. He's like, you realize like this is my restaurant. Like he was trying his hardest to go ahead and and upset him, and he had his own machinations, his own ideas of how he's going to upset this person, and everything he tried to do had the exact opposite effect. Paro says, I'm going to kill the boys, I'm going to enslave these people. What happens? Paro's daughter Batya takes a Jewish boy from where? From the river. Calls him Moshe. Why? Because Mishisihu minamayim. She pulls out this baby from the river. Okay? Pulls out the baby from the river. And now this baby who's coming out of the river is born and raised in the house of Paro. Think about that. He wanted all these kids to be destroyed, and now the place, the salvation comes from where? From his own home, his own palace. Comes from his own palace. Now, what happens is that who's raised in the palace? Moshe, a slave son, is raised in the palace. And the question is why? Why is it that Moshe had to have been raised in the palace? Couldn't he have been born as a slave in a slave pit with a taskmaster? Why did he need to be born and raised in the palace? The Chachamim say a very powerful lesson. Let's deconstruct this for a moment. If Moshe was born in the palace, that means that's the only way he could have freed the Jewish people, which means that if Moshe would have had a slave mentality, he could never have contended with Paro. So what has to happen? He has to be raised as what? He has to be raised as a prince of Egypt, to recognize his princeliness, that he comes from Malchut, that he comes from royalty. And with that royalty, he has the courage to overcome Paro's challenges. He has the power of overcoming and standing there ready to fight for the Jewish people with this great, great king. The Parsha is telling us that how we perceive ourselves determines how we respond to our environment. What's your name? How do you see yourself in the world? Do you think of yourself as being a servant, a slave? Are you just a bad human being? Are you the most unlucky person on the planet? Do you recognize that you are the daughter of a king? That you are a princess? Do you recognize how profoundly powerful you are? Or do you just think of yourself as an abed, as a slave, right? How you relate to yourself is so profound. The two major lessons of this first chapter of Shemot is, number one, you're not in control. Do your hishtadlut, do what you can, and remember, let go, let God. Let God do his thing for you. And more than that, you think you have this whole thing figured out? Yeah, you may have it figured out. But if you don't believe that you're a prince and a princess, you can't move forward in life. If you think you're ordinary, you're not going to create anything extraordinary. It doesn't work like that. I'll tell you a story. Rabbi Kelman has a son named, he has a son who's his youngest son. He calls him Kadosh. He calls him holy. It's a nickname. And they called him Kadosh, my little Kadosh, come here, Kadosh, 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 wherever he is, right? So they're I think they were in New York, and this little kid needed to go to the bathroom. And they see the only thing that's open that's late at night is a bar. So his father says, come, you'll use the bathroom in this bar. And the son looks at his father, and Rabbi Kelman, and says, Dad, I can't go in there. He's like, why not? You just told me you have to go to the bathroom. He's like, yeah. He's like, but I'm Kadosh. I'm Kadosh. And therefore, if I'm Kadosh, how could someone think Kadosh walk into a place like that? If we perceive ourselves as individuals that are like royalty, right, you'll accomplish royal things. If you recognize that you have the power of being something more, right, you relate to your name, you don't allow yourself to surrender to the servitude of the world that we live in, you can find the power to overcome the place that you're in right now and become something bigger. The Parsha is about breaking odds. We think that we're in control. Oh, I got it, Rabbi. I figured it all out. I'm going this way. You might not be going that way. Maybe you should be going that way. Who says that that's the right path? The one thing that we always need to be mindful of is that are we growing? I don't care what you do. I don't care if you keep Shabbat or keep kosher. It doesn't really matter to me. Do you still have audio? Can you hear me right now? Tanaz? Everyone on Zoom could hear me, right? Okay, good. What about on Instagram? Can you guys hear me? Okay, thanks, Jessica. Can you guys hear me up there? All right. I'm going to assume that you can at this point. I got a phone call, which is why it was interrupted. I apologize. I don't know why it got through. The simple idea of this week's parasha is recognizing that there's a Borei Olam, that he loves you, he cares about you, he wants you to find success. But if you don't relate to yourself as being the daughters of a king, you'll never ascend to becoming something more. Moshe came from nothing. He was drawn out of the water in the same place. The irony, that was the same system that was designed to destroy him, but that same system gave him the power, the ability of toppling one of the greatest superpowers of the world at the time. My blessing to each of you is that, number one, make your names great, right? Buy into your identities. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't let anyone tell you anything different. Number two, keep pushing, but sometimes remember that God has other plans for us. Don't get upset when things don't go your way. Just readjust. And lastly is recognize that you are queens, that you are princesses, and you'll find yourself having the courage, the confidence to overcome everything that stands in your way. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom Mevarach. Looking forward to continuing the conversation, Bezrat Hashem, next week. Please stay healthy, stay awesome, and again, Shabbat Shalom Mevarach.